Chapter 3 Her Imperial Majesty. "Thanks for your help, Yosef," said Annie. "Yeah, thanks a lot," said Jack. "You're very welcome," said Yosef. "I hope you will enjoy yourselves at the party." "We will." "People do," said Annie, "and we copy them. Come on." Jack and Annie walked over to the sweeping stairway. They started up the steps, following the other party guests. The women all wore glittering jewels and gowns with giant hoop skirts. The men wore wigs with white curls flowing down over the collars of their long coats. All the clothes were made of silk and satin and velvet in rich colors and patterns. "Oh, brother," said Jack. "What?" said Annie. "There's that kid who yelled at me," Jack said. The small boy from the blue coach was standing at the top of the stairs. He wore a lilac-colored coat with gold braid. A tiny sword hung from his side. "A sword?" said Jack. "That's ridiculous. He can't be more than 4 or 5 years old." The boy turned and caught sight of Jack and Annie. A big smile crossed his round face. He waved at them. "He's cute," said Annie. She waved back. "Not really," said Jack. A man grabbed the boy's hand and pulled him into the palace. "And you thought I looked funny?" said Jack. "How's my wig now?" Annie giggled. "It's crooked again," she said, "and your ears are poking out. Hold on." Jack and Annie stopped on the stairs. Annie grabbed both sides of Jack's wig and gave it a good yank. "Move along, children. You're holding up the line," a woman behind them said. Annie picked up her hoop skirt, and she and Jack hurried up the stairs. At the top, Jack pulled their invitation up. Red Roses was standing near Jack and Annie. When the line moved, Jack waited for the girl to go ahead. The girl smiled. "I'm not in line," she said in a soft voice. "I'm waiting for my brother." Jack nodded, and he and Annie stepped forward. Jack craned his neck to get a better view inside the great Rosa room. He couldn't see Her Imperial Majesty yet, but he could see part of the fancy room with its red velvet chairs and gold-trimmed glossy white walls. Another guest entered the great Rosa room, and Jack and Annie took a step closer to the door. Now Jack could see Her Imperial Majesty. She was a tall, plump woman dressed in a blue silk gown with ruffles. To Jack's surprise, the little kid with the sword was sitting on her lap. A long row of older children stood behind her. Jack turned to Annie. "Who do you think those kids are?" he asked. Annie shrugged. "They are the children of Her Imperial Majesty," said the girl who had spoken to Jack earlier. "The Imperial children." "Oh, thanks," said Annie. "The Imperial children look pretty unfriendly," Jack whispered to Annie. The little boy with the sword was the only one smiling. "Well, it must be really hard to just stand there wearing stiff clothes and wigs while people are being received," Annie whispered back. "Prepare yourselves, you are next," a servant at the door said to Jack and Annie. Oh no, thought Jack. He'd been too busy looking at the Imperial children to watch the guests in front of him. "What do we do when we meet Her Imperial Majesty?" he asked Annie frantically. "I don't know, I forgot to watch," she said. Annie turned to the girl in the white dress. Excuse me, can you tell us what to do when we meet Her Imperial Majesty?" she asked. The girl leaned close to Annie and whispered, "Enter the room and announce your names, then walk to the middle of the room. You must curtsy. He must bow. Next, go directly up to Her Imperial Majesty and do the same." "Got it," said Annie. "Oh, and remember," the girl said to Jack, "do not rise from the second bow until Her Imperial Majesty tells you to. Do not even look up. Rise only when she says rise. Then step backward out of the room." "Backward?" said Jack. "Yes, you must never turn your back on Her Imperial Majesty," said the girl. "It would be considered very bad manners." "Thanks," said Jack. He was grateful to the girl for giving them such important information. The servant at the door turned and nodded to Jack and Annie. The two of them stepped into the great Rosa room. "Annie of Frog Creek," Annie said loudly. "Jack, also of Frog Creek," said Jack. Jack and Annie walked slowly to the center of the room. Her Imperial Majesty and the Imperial children watched them closely. The little boy with the sword waved at them. Annie curtsied, and Jack gave a low bow. Then Jack and Annie walked closer to her Imperial Majesty. She had a double chin, a high forehead, and lots of teeny blonde curls. Jack smiled at her, but her pale face stayed very serious. Annie curtsied again, and Jack gave a second bow. As he bowed, he remembered that it was bad manners to rise or look up before her Imperial Majesty told him to. Jack stared at the shiny buckles on his shoes, waiting to hear her Imperial Majesty say rise. Maybe I'm not bowing low enough, Jack thought. He bent over a few inches more. To his horror, the silver flute slipped out of his coat pocket. It clattered to the floor. As Jack grabbed it, his hat fell off. The Imperial children snickered. Clutching the flute, Jack reached for his hat with his other hand. But when he grabbed his hat, his wig fell off. Jack reached for his wig, but powder got on his nose, and he sneezed. As he sneezed, he slipped on the polished floor and fell to his knees. Gripping his wig, his hat, and his flute, Jack scrambled back up to his bowing position, but he still hadn't heard her Imperial Majesty tell him to rise. The Imperial children laughed loudly. Jack even heard her Imperial Majesty laughing. She probably can't speak because she's laughing so hard, thought Jack. He didn't know what to do. His face was burning hot. You've got to get out of here, he told himself. Still bowing, Jack began backing up with little steps until he bumped into a wall. As the Imperial children howled with laughter, Jack turned his head and saw Annie peeking out from a doorway, giggling. He backed over to her. Annie grabbed his coattails and pulled him out of the great Rosa room. The Imperial children clapped and cheered. Jack heard one of the girls say between gulps of laughter, "Who was that fool?" "That was Jack of Frog Creek," answered the small boy in his high voice, and they all laughed loudly again.